In the kingdom of Asgardia, the Knights of Falador are beacons of order and chivalry, but their dominance is threatened by the forces of chaos which plot to shatter the time of peace. When a mysterious young woman suddenly appears in the city of Falador, in the teeth of a storm, her arrival launches a chain of events that will alter the fate of the kingdom forever. Hello and welcome to Liam's Lyceum. I'm your host, Liam, aka Himvar. Today I'll be doing a spoiler-free review of T.S. Church's Betrayal at Falador. Betrayal at Falador is a 2008 novel and the first of 3 RuneScape novels written by T.S. Church. Now, there were originally supposed to be 5 of these novels, which I found out only a couple of weeks ago. And also, just beware, this is a reread for me. I don't reread often, but if you watched a video I made about nostalgic reads recently, I decided I would go ahead and read this one since I had finished it over 10 years ago, and it was a favorite at the time, though I was very active in playing RuneScape at the time as well. The story starts us in the city of Falador, which is the jewel of the kingdom of Asgardia. That is home to the White Knights, who are worshippers of Saradomin and a chivalric order that promote peace and whatnot. Among the hustle of a fallen statue in the storm, a girl mysteriously appears on the bridge over the magically warded moat that surrounds the castle at the center of Falador. She is beaten and battered, and her armor is in tatters, and she is holding a white flower and a broken ring. And so this immediately starts a mystery that goes on for about half of the book, and I would say you can actually firmly cut the book in half, just a little probably before the halfway mark, maybe like 40%, 45%. There's like really 2 arcs that are going on. I guess you could put a third one in there that's in between those 2. But anyways, the second chapter is actually a dream, a nightmare from this girl's point of view and from her past. It tells us that her village was ravaged by the Black Knights, or the Kinshra, who are servants of chaos who worship the god Zamorak, who is the god of chaos and is often considered evil, especially by followers of Saradomin. Their leader in this attack was a man named Sulla, who the girl wants to get vengeance on. We learn her name in short enough time and find her to be rather brave, somewhat ferocious, maybe a little foolhardy, and, well, definitely stuck on vengeance. I think the mystery in this novel is done actually really well, and honestly the gothic elements are one of the best parts of the story, which kind of lends me to liking the first half of the story more, because that's where the mystery is, that's where the gothic elements are kind of explored, and then later on we get a lot more combat going on, because there is a siege actually in this story. Now at the beginning though, there are supernatural things going on, which, if I remember also, they only do increase in the next books, based off of kind of what happens at the end of this one, and I honestly think Church does an extraordinary job with the atmosphere, especially with the use of weather, which is something I'm a sucker for. Also, Church's prose is rather straightforward, and it leaves a lot up to the reader to imagine, and in this case I enjoyed that, but it also, in the same case, doesn't suck you in so much, so just beware of that. As the name suggests, there is a betrayal. This traitor was one that was a little more obvious this time around, even though I did know who it was, so it's kind of hard to tell how obvious it is, and maybe how subtle it is. It's hard to, well, it's hard for me to see how subtle it is because I already knew who the traitor was. That's one thing I did know going into the story, since it was a reread. And honestly, the characters are not the most dynamic throughout the story, especially at the start, and then in the latter half, Sir Amic gets a good amount of development. And I wouldn't even say he's one of the main characters, but I probably only say that because I don't remember him being a character really at all in books 2 or 3. And so I guess he is a main character here though. But Theodore, who I felt like was supposed to be our main character, along with Karamir, Karamir does get some development, especially near the end. Theodore gets some, though I remember him getting a lot more development in book 2 and 3. But that being said, Theodore is only about 17 in the story, and he acts accordingly. And he is a squire of the White Knights. He's steadfast, and he is the one who comes into contact with this mysterious girl. And this kind of goes with, actually, but somewhat against, which this against stuff comes later in the different books again, his duties as a member of the White Knights. In this case, the White Knights are kind of in like a rivalry with the Imperial Guards, who are up in the northern city of Berthup. And even though many of these characters are young, they act like adults in some ways. They have the emotions of teenagers, but I would say they act like adults mostly because of their lot in life, putting them in positions where they need to act like adults. So it's kind of nice not having teenagers that are, well, I guess what we'd think of modern day teenagers, that's not a bag on teenagers, but I think you might understand what I'm trying to say. Another character is Castamir, who is a wizard's apprentice, but has been for several years at this point, so he's somewhat, knowledgeable in the ways of wizardry. There's also Doric, a dwarf living between Falador and Taberley, which is a small town north of Falador, in between Falador and Bertha. And this is where one of the mysterious beasts slaughters victims, at least is in this area, and Doric gets targeted because of that. Well, because he's an outsider, right? He's the only dwarf in the area, so he gets targeted because he's different. There was one time in the story that actually, when Castamir is recounting the story to Theodore, that they both knew as they were best friends growing up in Remington, but Castamir says something for the reader's sake, which was a little telly and not showy, where I thought it didn't work. Sometimes I feel like that's fine, but that one time I felt like it didn't really work very well. It seemed kind of like it was being spoon-fed to me. Another character is Garth, or Garth, I don't actually know how to say it. If you read it, you'll see there's an apostrophe in there. He is afflicted with some malady that is mysterious and he's trying to be helped by Ebenezer the alchemist, who is also with Castamir for most of the story, but he has taken Garth into his care when he is with the druids. And Garth is an odd person, as he doesn't even seem to speak the common tongue, but he is about Theodore's and Garmir's age as well. Oh, and Castamir, I guess. They're all about that same age. And then, so along with this mysterious beast, we do get some chapters from this beast's point of view. We also have the despotic Sulla of the Kinshra, or Black Knights, prepping to attack their rivals, the White Knights. Sulla is a bit generic, but that's mostly from his creation of the game and not anything Church does wrong here. I will say that Church does a good job making the world of Gelenor come alive. The one thing that doesn't come through from the game is the cheeky British humor, and Church is British, so I guess that's just not what he was aiming for, and I honestly don't know if it would fit in the novel. I would say it probably wouldn't. But this is sort of an origin story for the party, or the group of friends, as they definitely don't start out in a tavern. They don't know each other at the beginning. They get to learn each other. They're kind of in somewhat of a party about halfway through. By the end, it's, a nice settling point to know that the party will kind of continue on. And honestly, it focuses on some good stuff about RuneScape, I feel like Gelenor, Zamrock of Chaos, Saradomin of Peace, and Guthix of Balance, which comes in more later into the book. But like I mentioned, this was a reread. I read it over 10 years ago. In some ways, I think it's held up decently well. Overall, it's not super original, but I think fans of RuneScape will enjoy it probably more than if you're not a fan of RuneScape. And so I think the story is still a good one. It's kind of YA, but it doesn't really have the bad tropes that I feel like often plague YA books. So those who read YA might also enjoy this. That remains to be seen. I haven't talked to anyone who's really read it. But for example, there is sort of a love triangle. This again gets more work done in the second book. I just remember the second book handling the characters' relationships really well. Overall, there are over 70 chapters. The paperback version, I think, is a little over 500 pages, if I remember correctly. But they're very short chapters, very straightforward style. It's very matter of fact. Lends a quick pace to the story. But maybe not a lot of thought, which could be a positive or a negative. It's kind of up to you to give that thought. There were a couple times when I thought a little more could have been more impactful, such as when Theodore speaks with Lord Raidbow. Church definitely improves as a writer later on in the series, and you can especially see this in his self-published standalone Prince Armistice and Dragon, which is not a RuneScape book. I also know he had to cut down, I believe, several thousand words, so maybe that's why some things seem like they could have been expanded upon a little bit, but he had to cut them down for the story's sake, according to Jack X's wishes. So there also, at one point, seems to be an Ubi Sunt used by Sir Amic, which I appreciated now, which is totally something I didn't realize before. And I think the siege work is done pretty well. But again, if you check out his standalone, Prince Armistice and Dragon, it's done even better there. And I do believe Mr. Church has an interest in Byzantine history, so you can kind of see that here. There are also I like to point these out whenever I see them because it reminds me of Star Wars or Sun Eater or Dune or whatever other thing, but there's a quote here that says, "Fear is paralysis. Fear is a greater enemy than any mortal foe." Because I always like pulling out those fear is the mind killer type thing going on, or fear is a poison. Anyways, been Liam with Liam's Lyceum. This is kind of rambly review. It's a little different because it is a reread. I think this is the first time I've actually what I would call a review for a reread here, since I don't do them very often. So, anyways, been Liam with Liam's Lyceum. If you want to chat more, go hop on Discord. It's linked down below. Until next time.